Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The news all over the social medias today. Ted Cruz. Ted, what hath thou done, Ted? There's some tapes. Evidently, one of the Fox producers taping some stuff with one of the hosts and Ted. Doesn't look good. I haven't heard all the tapes. I want to hear all the rest of them. But, at this moment, at this juncture, maybe Ted should have gone to Cancun then as well. Because it's not looking good for him. Now, I've had a whole bunch of people go, this is the end of Ted. No. Understand, there's no shame in these people. There's no depth to the lows they will sink. So don't get all excited. I'm tired of people getting excited and all worked up. This is finally, we got the smoking. No, there's no smoking gun yet. Could this be? I don't know. We're going to find out. But interesting day for Ted. So we will see. And look, honestly, couldn't happen to a nicer guy. If it is the smoking gun, if it is finally someone held accountable, could not happen to a nicer guy. Well deserving of whatever punishment comes their way. Now, the other big news, President Biden announced he is going to run for re-election. It is the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign. And put out a little 3-minute video kind of going through the whole deal. The big moment, he gave a speech in front of the building trades folks, the North American Building Trades Union's legislative conference in D.C., where you got all the bricklayers and pipe fitters and all those folks together, the painters, all of them together to talk about, hey, how are we going to rebuild this country and do the things that Biden has put on the table? And look, he said, the line. The middle class built America, and unions built the middle class. Sing along with me, because that was pretty much the chorus of this speech, and it's the right place for him to be. Because as I've said numerous times, it's not right. It's not red hat, blue hat. It's hard hat. It's getting people back to work. It's always the economy, stupid. It's always the jobs. It's always rebuilding for the future. It's always investing in tomorrow that gets you reelected and moves you down the road. And this is something, again, I said during the Trump years, had Donald Trump come out on day one and said, we're going to have a big chunky, because he was floating the idea of a $2 trillion infrastructure bill. Didn't actually do it. Opted instead, and this was I'm going to guess this was a strategic plan by the Trump administration at the time to not do anything, but talk about it a lot and even more. And every week be infrastructure week, so that we're highlighting just how bad our infrastructure is while not actually doing anything about it. And if you remember, there was a lot of fun that came out of the infrastructure weeks. I still remember some of the little hard hats that Trump wore, him driving the truck, one of my favorites, him yelling at the kid, mowing the grass. It was an interesting time. But again, we didn't get anything done, did we? They didn't rebuild bridges. They didn't pave the roads. They didn't invest in broadband, none of that stuff. What's happening right now? And the folks in this room that the president was giving his spiel today, they are the ones who are out there doing the work. And the president said, on my watch, infrastructure has become a decade headline. A decade. He said, that's where you all come in. No, really, he said. That's where you all come in. We've already announced over 25,000 infrastructure projects in 4,500 towns across America. And we're just getting started, he said. Not even close. Union workers will build roads, bridges, lay internet cable, install 500,000 electric vehicle chargers throughout America, and union workers are going to transform America, and union workers are going to finish the job. And see, if it were me, if I were writing that speech, I would say, you're going to finish the job on time and under budget, because that's kind of the mantra there. And, for me, this speech kind of important. Because the reality is, as much as I beat up on Biden for him not being able to get the words out, not having a real, not being the orator of our day, man, he's getting the job done. I mean, we got the money to finally. Now understand, I've been talking about infrastructure for all 18 years of doing this. Every time you turn around, you go, we need something done. Bridge collapse, need that built. Where our studio was years ago in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the sinkhole capital of the world at that point, buses were being swallowed up, garbage trucks, you name it, the roads were crumbling. And I was saying, what would be great? It'd be great if we had an infrastructure plan that, actually did something with the sewage system. Because the sewers under the streets are like 120 years old. Maybe, I don't know, dig them up, put some new stuff in. Could create some jobs, could give some people some ability to support families, could be good for us. And that's exactly what this administration has done. Now, all we get from the other side, and this again is one of those moments where you go, what exactly is the alternative message? What are the Republicans bringing to the table? They're talking about undoing everything that hasn't been spent. They're talking about, clawing back all because we need to make things worse for the economy. And it's crazy. Now, Biden did highlight the fact that we need to make aggressive investments. That means we need to be spending money. We need to be reshoring manufacturing. We need to bring research and development back here. Something that is not political. Not red hat, not blue hat. Simply hard hat. Back to work. It's about the economy. It's jobs, stupid. And the idea of competing with China. Look, it doesn't mean that China's good or bad. And he said this flat out. It means it's about competition. It's about us winning. And I'm grateful that he's saying that. It's about time. Say, look, we've got to reshore manufacturing. We've got to build stuff here. Now, again, we're in this moment. We're in this weird moment because, as I asked, what do the Republicans bring to the table? What's the grand plan? What's the future going to bring us other than more rich people getting tax breaks and deciding whatever they want is good for them, and the heck with us? I look at North Dakota. The Republican Party in North Dakota, they have decided that women have to give birth. This is no matter what, rape, incest, whatever, you will have that child, woman. And yet, almost simultaneously, they voted against providing school lunch programs for hungry kids. So think about this. We're going to force you to have kids because it's a state's responsibility to make sure you have that baby. We're not going to pay for it in any way, but you're going to have it. And then we're not going to feed them because it's not the state's responsibility. I mean, this is a classic which side are you on moment. And for me, I keep coming back to the treatment of the working class in this country for far too long. Everything to me, no matter what they throw at me, no matter what transgender bathroom issue they want to throw out or what, gay marriage or whatever, no matter what outrage candy they send me, I bring it back to the fact that as a working class, we're all getting screwed over. And these are the divisive things that are meant to pit us against each other. And the sooner we say, you know what? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. If someone wants to go do what they want to do, God bless them, let them do it. How am I going to feed my children? How am I going to keep a roof over our kids' head? How am I going to save for retirement? Will my job have decent wages, good conditions? See, this used to be the stuff that we talked about. Oh, no, not anymore. Because, look, the outrage machine has done an incredible job of divide and conquer. And I argue this has a lot to do with the fact that we have massive wealth consolidation in this country. The owners, the wealthy, they control just about everything. And, the weird thing is I had someone, just yesterday ask me, because I did a spiel on, on why we need to be taxing the rich and we need to be using that money for investments. Oh, I don't know, like bridges and infrastructure. And they said, well, what's wrong with wealth consolidation? What's wrong with having rich people? And I go, well, nothing if you don't want to have any real democracy. If you want to have a dictatorship, it's great to have oligarchs. It's great to have a handful of people who make all the decisions. It's great to do that. But when you have mass inequality that wealth consolidation brings you, what you then have is social and political upheaval. You have instability, which is, hello, I don't know if you've paid attention. I don't know if you've been looking around lately. There's some funny stuff going on. Let's leave it at that. And the reality is it's harder for working people to make ends meet. So what do? They take control of what they can. And that's just human nature. It's this isn't what's the matter of Kansas. Only it's America. For me, the idea of having such mass consolidation is the fact of the matter is when you have a handful controlling the entire economy, when you have monopolization like we have going on, there's very limited mobility. So if you were born at the bottom, if you were born like I was, where they put the socioeconomic ladder on top of, you don't get out of there. Which is why, again, I'm not in favor of a handful of people controlling all the wealth. And it's also harder when the socioeconomic ladder is on your back to climb it, to get better health care, to get better educational opportunities, to get better housing. There are so many things that wealth inequality causes in this country that because we have this deference to the wealth class, that we then surrender from ourselves. Which is why the Republican Party has, messaging-wise, masterfully, the old party, crazy today, but it was always low taxes, less government, deregulation. And you go, who benefits with lower tax rates? Who benefits with the deregulation? Who benefits in that world? No government. Who benefits? Well, the wealthy and the powerful. The working people then just become the tools. And as I've said a number of times, there's a move in this country to move us back to the good old days of the Lochner era, where if you were hungry enough and desperate enough to work in poverty conditions for desperation wages, well, that was your liberty, your freedom. Don't you love when people talk about freedom and don't actually know what it means? I love when people talk about freedom, and I've come to the reality that anybody who throws out that freedom word means their freedom. They don't give a tinker's damn about yours or anyone else's, especially my religious folk. But we seriously are. We're in a which side are you on moment. And Biden running for re-election, I wish he were 20 years younger. But I'll tell you, the policies that he is bringing in the older Biden, the dark Biden, the dark Brandon, I'm happy with. Because it means on the other side of this, we're going to be a much more competitive country, moving in a direction of actually making things, and a much more technologically advanced country, because we're going to be investing in the future. So I'm interested to see where the right attacks, because the Twitter mafia, the blue check mark folks, they were all in defense of the Fox guy and the Ted Cruz. We will see where it takes us. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I got a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. You miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available for, I think a couple of years worth up there. So you got a lot of catching up to do if you've missed anything. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey is calling on Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to pack it in, a resignation. Because look, there's a lot here. There are a lot of allegations of corruption. I mean, when you're the guy sitting on the highest court in the land and you're claiming, well, I didn't know how to fill out the form. What, a form? You mean I had to fill that out? You mean check that box? I wasn't sure what the box meant. It's how we've always done it. All of the excuses that judges would never fall for, he seems to be making. Now, is he going to resign? No. No, heavens, no. But I give him credit. I give Markey credit for coming out and saying, hey, your reputation's unsalvageable. And I would argue not a great reputation to begin with, but hey, we'll see. John Roberts was asked to come testify. John Roberts said, no, thank you. I don't want to have to talk about this. And this is, again, another one of these moments where if it's you, if it's me, if it's any working person who gets caught up in this, do you think you got the option? Do you think you get to go, no, I think I prefer not to? Of course not. They're dragging you in there. And the thing that bothers me is it's not just, and I said this from the beginning, you may remember when this story first broke, I go, every one of them are doing it. Every one of them are bought and paid for by some billionaire, especially the six that are on the right. Every one of them. And we now find out that Neil Gorsuch, couple of days after his confirmation, guess what? The law firm, big law firm, head of this big law firm, bought Gorsuch's property for a whole bunch of money. Some $500,000 that Gorsuch made selling this property to this CEO. And understand, they had extensive business before the higher court. And again, you had Gorsuch who failed to identify the buyer on any financial disclosure. And I know it's those things are just so difficult. They're so difficult to fill out. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are you today?
Oh, I'm insane. How are you?
I'm good. I'm still trying to figure out these forms because these forms are so complicated. They're so difficult that someone sitting on our Supreme Court just too difficult for them.
Yeah, they're probably related to people in West Virginia. But, the reason why I called was you were talking earlier, and what I wanted to say was, the type of government that the Republicans and their base seem to want is all we have to do is just look a little bit out of Sarah Palin's backyard and into Russia. And that's basically what they want. They want the dictator president in charge and then the oligarchs. I have been listening for a couple of years to a man who fled Russia last fall. He had lived all over the world, works for an international corporation. And he recently was saying that all the money that was taken in by Putin and his little pals, and they were supposed to be spending on the equipment and so forth. It's obvious now with everything falling apart for them, equipment-wise.
Yeah, so what you're saying is the military is doing such a poor job because they stole all the money that was supposed to go into upkeeping the equipment.
Yeah, and I thought, that's exactly seems to be what they want. Is, you have the oligarchs and then everybody else gets the scraps And of course, you have the national religion, which in this case for Russia is Russian Orthodox. And for y'all listening out there that's going, yeah, they believe in Jesus, it's a Catholic religion, but it's not Roman Catholic. But, it's just obvious to me that the Republican base would be happy with that. But have a good evening,
Thanks,
Rick.
Alice. Appreciate it. No, and that's not. There's a couple of videos going on TikTok of this guy going around and asking people would they rather have Biden or Putin, and a bunch of them are saying we'd rather have Putin because we trust him. And I go, my mind explodes because I guess because I grew up during the Soviet era, that I don't trust the Russians. I don't trust a former KGB officer. It's just I guess it's one of my fatal flaws, perhaps, in right-wing world. But no, the sad reality is we're in this weird spot where, again, we're not holding people accountable. When our Supreme Court justices, when they can get away with this stuff, and look, I want to know who paid off Kavanaugh's debts. I want to know, who's funding Alito. I want to know where Roberts is getting money because Roberts is the most, the wealthiest guy on the court. There needs to be an investigation, and it needs to happen now. Will we do it? I don't know. Will the Democrats be able to muster? I think they will, but will it go anywhere? No, because we're in our camps. We're siloed off. And we're not able to think about the fact that we've got people sitting on our Supreme Court making decisions about our lives based on who their friends are and who's funding them, who's taking them on vacation. That's angering and frustrating. And it comes back to it's the money, stupid. I saw this story, retired Army General Keith Alexander, who was the head of the National Security Agency under both Obama and W. Bush. It's now been reported that he got something like $2 million in consulting gigs from foreign governments after he left office. $2 million in consulting gigs. 700,000 of that from the Saudis on cybersecurity after Khashoggi was killed. And you go, am I missing something? And the answer is no, I'm not missing anything. It's all about the money. And when these folks have the opportunity to cash in, that flag that they love to wave in our face, that doesn't matter. And this is where my mind goes to, we have to come back together on some level and be able to talk to each other on some level without devolving into whatever the outrage of the day is. Because we are being robbed blind. Every time we turn around, we're getting ripped off. Wages have been stagnant for 40 years and declining. So as we have a billionaire class who's lining their pocket, where'd that money come from? It came from the work that working people did and aren't being compensated for. And we got to start training our thinking to go back to that, what my grandparents' generation understood. And have a tax code that says, you know what, maybe we don't want to have these gazillionaires who can afford to take a Supreme Court justice on a $500,000 vacation at the drop of a hat, or buy a couple of properties for, just in case we want to, maybe, influence something down the road. It's kind of angering. It's kind of frustrating. I do want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, pretty good victory out on the West Coast as some delivery drivers have organized at Amazon. We're going to find out about that when we come back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day hundreds of thousands of Detroit area auto workers returned to their jobs after bringing car production to a complete standstill. They walked off the job to protest the union-busting Taft-Hartley bill, then pending in Congress. Chrysler, Ford, Hudson, and Kaiser Fraser corporations were all shut down. George Romney, head of the Automobile Manufacturers Association, decried the work stoppage as a contract violation, costing the industry millions. The UAW called 350,000 of its members out in protest the day before. As many as 500,000 area workers walked off the job. 2 marches were organized organized from the east and west sides of the city that brought as many as 275,000 workers, black and white, men and women, AFL and CIO, converging onto Cadillac Square. A reported 65,000 workers from the Ford River Rouge plant alone marched as a contingent to the rally. Planes flew overhead trailing banners that read, "Oppose anti-labor legislation in Washington," "Down with Jim Crow legislation," and "Fight repeal of the Wagner Act." UAW leaders addressed the crowd at the 5-hour rally stating, "The measures, if passed, would cut the heart of our unions into 1,000 tattered, bloody pieces." They declared the anti-labor bills as nothing more than proposals to punish the innocent and reward the guilty. For the record establishes that responsibility for recent major strikes rests without exception on the shoulder of industry. Briggs Local 212, which spearheaded the protest, marched with banners that demanded an independent labor party, while veteran auto workers carried placards that read, "We veterans didn't fight for union busting." The rally ended with the crowd singing solidarity and joining picket lines at nearby Bell Telephone to support striking phone workers.
Given the rabid right-wingism of most Republican office holders in my state of Texas, you might assume that the climate here is only fit for rattlesnakes, scorpions, and venomous critters of pious political extremism. Yet, the true Texas political character, historically and currently, is vehemently anti-corporate and deeply rooted in the uniting ethic of the common good. For an historic example, look to the state's first constitution. It outlawed banks and required a 2/3 vote of the legislature to form a corporation. And today, grassroots Texans in the rural town of Llano have just demonstrated the power of progressive community values that are common in this supposedly conservative state. The issue was book banning. A batch of political extremists had decided to purge the public library of 17 books. Porno, they shrieked, yet none are pornographic. They're simply about ideas and realities that Republican culture war zealots don't like. Namely, books documenting the history of institutional racism in America and the normality of America's LGBTQ community. Common sense Llano locals rebelled, suing the county government for autocratically trying to control the people's freedom to read and learn. And a federal judge has now ruled that the book banning was flagrantly unconstitutional, ordering the targeted titles back on the shelves. Then, in a collective spasm of knee-jerk ignorance and arrogance, the county's book-banning officials announced that, by gollies, they would just defund and shut down the entire library system. Yeah, that'll teach people to respect authority. Again, though, locals rebelled, turning out in force to protest the officials' political chicanery, forcing them to reverse their closure scheme. This is Jim Hightower saying, as one 10-year-old student in Llano succinctly testified, it's not the county's job to burn the library down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some pretty impressive news coming out of the West Coast. It turns out 84 Amazon delivery drivers have unionized with the Teamsters out on the West Coast. They won a neutrality and voluntary union recognition with this Amazon delivery contractor, Battle-Tested Strategies. And I'm going, what? How did they manage that? And that's why I've asked my good friend Randy Corrigan to come talk with us. Randy's the Secretary-Treasurer and Principal Officer at Teamsters Local 1932, Teamsters1932.org, the website, if you want to take a look at their website. Randy, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, anytime. It's been a busy few days for us. Thanks for having me on, Rick.
Yeah, the news, incredible. But walk me through this. You got a neutrality and voluntary recognition agreement out of these guys. How did you manage that? Out of an Amazon contractor, how did you manage that?
Yeah, there are some employers out there, contractors out there that recognize that their workforce being union is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think we had that circumstance and situation here unfold very quickly here over the last week and a half or so. Amazingly, these workers over the last 2 years in this delivery station had been doing concerted activity, had been doing petitions, and had been there and the good thing is the owner of their delivery station supported them. Like they're in Palmdale, California, in the desert. It's really hot in the summer, right? They had extreme heat conditions, allowed these drivers to bring back their packages, not complete their day because it was too hot. And obviously Amazon punished them. And so these workers recognized that they needed some protection under a collective bargaining agreement. And clearly the owner of the company, of the contracting service, recognized that them being under collective bargaining agreement probably helped him deal with Amazon on top of it, because his caution to Amazon and the things in which that company tried to pass on to Amazon to protect the workforce, their working conditions and their environment, were largely ignored by Amazon. And so it just ended up being a perfect situation. We believe there's a lot more DSPs that are willing to do this across the country. And at the end of the day, the workers themselves can choose to push this in the right direction. And sometimes we're able to gain recognition and get a collective bargaining agreement. You know, it's not my first rodeo in this. It's my first rodeo for it to be an Amazon contractor, but we've been able to find success in this space over the last 25 years repetitively in the transportation industry.
Now, immediately when the news broke, I got emails from people from all over the place going, is this Amazon or is this a contractor? So this is a contractor. This isn't Amazon. Because a lot of people are going, Amazon's first unionized and they've agreed to this. This is a contractor, right?
Correct. It's a contractor, but it's also a contractor that, ironically, as everybody will see when they get a package delivered at their door from Amazon, it comes in an Amazon van and the driver's wearing an Amazon uniform and everything is Amazon wrapped around it and about it. And at the end of the day, they are a contractor, or are they really Amazon? That poses a great legal question. But most importantly, the pressures in which were put on these workers were put on them by Amazon directly, not necessarily the contractor. And so there's a lot of discussion that will be obviously had in this space in the very near future,
right,
regarding not only the legal argument that we just discussed, but most importantly, where the workers can get a reprieve from the pressures put on them.
Now, the reason I brought that up and I wanted to clarify that is that the number of people have said that they believe that once the contract with this contractor is up, Amazon will shun them away and pursue someone else. Is that a possibility? Is that something you're preparing for?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, we assume that that's what Amazon's going to do. And we think that, Amazon's got a track record of being anti-worker, anti-union, and will obviously move in that direction. And I know we've explained that to the workforce, but the workers have a right to fight for their the work in which they're performing. And even if Amazon decides to cancel the contract or do whatever everybody wants to make assumptions that they're going to do, those workers have a right to fight for that work and obviously encourage other workers to do the same thing that may work for other contractors.
Now, you said something that caught my ear there. They pull up in an Amazon van. They're wearing the Amazon clothes. They're doing the Amazon work. They're delivering when and where and how and all of that. Aren't they actually just Amazon workers? Can't there be an argument made here so that at some point we break down this third-party logistics model? And if you're delivering an Amazon package or even a FedEx package or Bob's delivery service package, that's who you work for?
There's a very, very, very solid argument on that. Right now, publicly, our position is to protect the workers' right to do what they're doing, and we do have a tentative agreement. I negotiated it. I also put language in the contract that allowed for the contractor to go to Amazon and obviously address issues. And if Amazon was unwilling to adjust their business model and stop the clamping down on it, that they could come back to the union and then we would engage the next step of the process to deal with it. Obviously, the legal path will take its course, but I think everybody knows the answer to the question you just asked. Clearly, if they're in Amazon uniforms, they're driving an Amazon van, Amazon exerts extreme control over the operation. We all know what the law says on that subject, but that's another subject for another day.
Right.
The what's up front is what these workers have the right to do and what they have the right to do.
No, and this is incredible stuff. This is great. This is a model to move forward with, especially as the International Brotherhood of Teamsters is negotiating with UPS on their contract to make those conditions better. This seems to me to be an opportunity to make the entire industry better. No matter if you're driving a brown package car or an Amazon car or whatever, you're making decent wages, hours, conditions, and working in safe working conditions as well.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. You're right. Companies like Amazon have created downward pressure on the working conditions. If you were to know all the details in which these workers' conditions are working under, it's pretty crazy. Pictures I personally saw of roads that they had to go down, that they felt they had to do. They couldn't, just reject the package and say undeliverable. Just the amount of pressure that these Amazon drivers feel is obviously in stark contrast to what a UPS driver feels when they say undeliverable. I'm not going down that road, or I'm not walking into that fence where that poor pit bulls are going to bite me. And so, protections in which are won under the UPS contract clearly are goals in which these workers in Amazon are looking towards. But also, you have a challenge in the industry as a whole. Clearly, our members mobilizing towards what they're mobilizing for in holding UPS accountable, but also workers mobilizing at Amazon. And we all know that there are workers that are very unhappy at Amazon across the entire country. And now you can occupy that space collectively and ask workers as a whole to really bring some parity in the industry. These are the opportunities that present themselves, and whether or not these workers are willing to do that, they've taken the first few steps. There are more steps to take.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Randy Corrigan, Secretary, Treasurer, and Principal Officer of Teamsters Local 1932. You want to check out their website, teamsters1932.org, talking about the big victory out on the West Coast at the Amazon contractor. You said something a moment ago that caught my attention, and it's one of these things that in talking with employers, I've brought up a number of times. We're trained to believe that there has to be an adversarial relationship between unions, workers, and employers. I mean, here in Pennsylvania, the workers' compensation law still looks at the employer-employee relationship as master and servant. There's a lot of us who still are in that frame, but the reality is anybody who's been in a union long enough knows it's a partnership, and the employees in the union want the company to do as well as the company wants to do well. And it doesn't have to be this butting heads that you could make Amazon a very profitable company and still a very good place to work.
You know as well as I do that 95%, if not 99% of the engagement between workers and the union and the employer in which these workers work for, the members work for, are all, sort of mutual interest engagements. They're not necessarily all knockdown, drag out, punch outs, right? That those are the very rare incidents where most of the time you're collectively solving problems either in the industry or at your employer or, for the customer or whatever it may be. And this misnomer that it's all adversarial all the time is just not true. And the reality is there are spaces in which the employer and the union and the workers can all collectively fight to make sure that there's balance in the industry. Amazon is a perfect example of that being a problem.
No, and I want to make sure that happens, because a couple of years ago I had convinced an employer that they should go and organize with a specific union and allow them to organize their workers, because they needed an HR department and they didn't have the money to be able to do it. And I said, look, this union will help bring you the people that you need to do a better job. And a couple of years later he came back, he said, it was the best move I ever made.
Yeah, it allows the employer to make sure that there's checks and balances in the system to keep the operation honest, the operators, and the managerial team honest, not just honest, but, on track for what they're supposed to do legally. And sometimes it's ignorance on behalf of management or middle management or supervision. And obviously having a union ensures that space is always going to be occupied in the right way.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the UPS negotiations. Obviously, that's the hot button issue right now with your union. Anything going on that we should know about? I know I've gotten a lot of communications from my friends in Chicago and Minneapolis saying, we're going to strike, and I'm not so sure. But I'm curious if you've got any insight that you can share. I know not anything that's going on at the bargaining table, but are we positive? Are we feeling in a positive direction at this moment?
I think so. I mean, I really do. You see this mass mobilization of the membership. You see an education program rolling out to where members understand that if you weren't happy with the previous contract, you have a right to express that opinion. And now you're back in bargaining now, and you're going to vote to go one way or another. Ultimately, the members decide whether they're going to go on strike. And, to say we're going to go on strike or not go on strike is all premature, simply because I've been doing this job long enough to know that you don't know that until you get to the very end. Once everybody's got to decide at that moment, this is crisis. Is this worth going to the street or not? First, employer with the demands. Second, workers, members, based on ratification or acceptance. And I think that it's called preparing for the worst and hoping for the best.
Yep.
Preparing everybody and making sure they understand what their rights are and what they're willing to do, and what, if they're willing to do it. And then you get to the point where an offer is served up, then they decide at that point whether it's acceptable.
Yeah, no, as someone who's walked across that threshold in my life, it's not an easy thing to do, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Strikes are always the last arrow in the quiver, and no one wants to do it, but sometimes you're backed into a corner, and it's the only way to jump start things. My mind keeps coming back to UPS has the resources to make the contract much better. And I keep coming back to the stock buybacks because nothing upsets me more than one of these companies who we've given so much to in tax breaks and so much to see them then take the money that they claim they were going to put back into new vehicles and new equipment and raises for workers, only to have them shove it in their own pocket. So nothing makes me crazier than that. And UPS had a pretty big stock buyback program.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously where the consternation comes from, and some of the struggle where the membership is like, hey, wait a minute, and that's the bargaining process. That's the beautiful part of the bargaining process right now.
It is.
Is we have the right to work our way through it, and it'll all come to a head sometime in mid to late July, and we'll either be walking off the job August 1st or everybody moving on and ratifying. But I want to tie it into this moment with Amazon. The reason why it's important to talk about Amazon in the same space is the mobilization of the members at UPS in the industry is absolutely tied to what's going on with the workers at Amazon, because they both impact one another in the industry. Our members impact the workers at Amazon, and the workers at Amazon obviously impact the members at UPS or DHL or Freight or any of the other transportation companies. And this is a moment in time in which we have to capture where workers recognize their power in the industry and they're able to exercise it in the right way. When you see a low-end employer like Amazon, the working conditions, these people we just organized don't even get paid holidays. They don't even get paid holidays. Like, you get holidays. There's 4 holidays that they were getting, but then none of them are paid. And
Wow.
that's coming from Amazon. Amazon pats himself on the back as a great employer that they provide all this great service. Like, wait till you hear some of the things we roll out. We're going to wait on the details of the agreement until it's ratified by the group itself. That's the fair thing to do. Don't allow everybody else to offer their opinion on something before the group itself has the right to make their decision. Within the next couple of days, the contract will be ratified. We know that it will. We're confident that it will. And then we'll talk about some of those pretty crazy conditions that they were working under, and then what that contractor was willing to agree to, and then clearly what Amazon's going to have to step up to the plate and deliver on themselves, because they're on the hook too here.
Yeah.
And it is an industry-wide approach. This stuff at UPS and Amazon happening at the same time. The reason I'm doubled down on this message right now is that once we get past August 1st and the contract is either accepted at UPS or we're on strike, at some point that negotiations will come to a conclusion, whether it's August 1st or July 31st or sometime late August, September, or however long the labor dispute may be. What we can't do is, whether we work in freight or UPS or anywhere else in the transportation industry, is then look past what the workers at Amazon are doing, because that fight is the fight for the future of this industry when it comes to transportation, period.
I'm right there with you. Randy, I appreciate the time. When you do roll this out, I hope you'll come back and share it with us so that we can see what advancements were made and maybe how we spread this to other people who want to do the same. But Randy Corrigan, appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Randy, our good friend at Teamsters Local 1932. Check out their website, teamsters1932.org. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Got the talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1978. That was the day of an important victory for any woman in the United States with a pension. The Supreme Court handed down its decision in a case known as Los Angeles Water Department versus Manhart. Manhart and a group of current and past female employees at the department had sued. The women were required to pay more into their pension than were the men. The reason for this policy was that women lived longer on average. That meant that the 2,000 women employed at the water department had to contribute nearly 15% more than their 10,000 male coworkers. The women argued that this violated Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which prohibited discrimination based on gender. The case wound its way through the court system. The ACLU filed a brief in support of the women's cause at the U.S. Supreme Court. The women won their case in a 6-2 decision. The majority of justices decided that even if women lived longer than men as a group, it would be impossible to know how long each individual woman might live. Therefore, individual women could not be held to a different standard for their pensions. The case was an important affirmation of the protections of the Civil Rights Act. Yet despite this victory, the women were not returned any of the extra money they had been required to pay into their pensions. Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens, writing for the majority, found that such retroactive payments could be, quote, devastating for a pension fund. He wrote that, quote, administrators of retirement plans must be given time to adjust gradually to Title VII's demands. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I gotta tell you, talking to Randy, that's a pretty big deal. Organizing those contractors and being able to press for better opportunities. And look, we've talked to some of these drivers, and the conditions that they work under are really, really horrible. I mean, I can't, just bad. And the wages aren't great. The conditions aren't great. The benefits aren't great. And it's because Amazon really does squeeze these contractors. So this could be a moment. This could be an interesting moment where these contractors, because the part that catches my mind is, they allowed a voluntary recognition of the union by going, okay, fine, organize them. This could be a moment where these contractors go, yeah, by all means, organize our workers and help us fight Amazon to get us more money to pay them better. That could be part of this as well, and it'll be interesting to see where this plays out. But this is a big deal. And what Amazon does next will be a big deal as well, because immediately, I asked Randy, what are you expecting? I had a bunch of people go, how much you want to bet that they don't make it past this contract? And that's been the MO of a lot of companies, which is the reason they set up these contractors. They set up these third-party logistics companies so that if they do have the audacity to organize and demand more, you just cut them off and bring in another one. This is why we need major comprehensive labor law reform in this country. And again, the organizing they're doing is really, really incredible, which is why the email I got today, I want to get into. Janice, listening on KTRC in Santa Fe, sent me this email, said, Rick, love the show. I feel I've known you for years, and you are that coworker I look forward to hearing from every day. Well, thank you, Janice. That's very nice. She says, I want to talk to my friends about worker organizing and coming together. What's the best message? And this is one of those things you go, well, the best message is organizing is about building worker power. It's about building solidarity between you and me and other coworkers, saying, you know what, we have a mutual interest. We want to do better. We want our kids to be able to have better health care and better educational opportunities. We want to do better. We want to have better wages so we don't have to, work as much overtime. It's the importance of collective action, and solidarity is, I can't emphasize that enough, that interconnectedness of us being, one entity fighting for the same thing. Because look, the reality is capitalism has done an amazing job, has a long history of exploiting workers, of you and me, ultimately to benefit who? Certainly not you or me, to benefit the handful at the very top, the folks who, well, own everything. And by organizing, you have the ability to fight back, to maybe counteract a little bit of it. You're never going to be equal, but the idea that you're fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, that means a lot. It's incredibly important. Now you go, but that's just in the workplace. And what I say, the reason that the right is opposed to unions and organizing is because it empowers people. When you can say no at work, I'm not going to drive down that alley. I'm not going to go into that place where those 4 pit bulls are. I'm not going to take a truck down the road with bad brakes. It empowers people in the workplace. And that, in turn, empowers people politically. And what our wealth class certainly does not want are empowered people. George Carlin has that bit, about where he goes, they want people just smart enough to, run the machines and do the paperwork, but not smart enough that we're getting screwed over. And we are getting screwed over. So for me, while fighting for better wages, hours, and conditions in the workplace is great, we should be fighting for structural changes, lasting changes to benefit workers, across the board. This third-party logistics stuff, the use of misclassifying workers as independent contractors. We should be fighting this stuff. Instead, they're going, no, this is your only way forward. This is the only way you're going to be able to make a living because they're going to take this from you. No, we should be fighting for us together. I've had people go, why do you care about the LGBTQ issue? Why do you care about the trans issue? And honestly, it's not my issue. None of it's my issue. But what I understand is if you can divide us on those issues, if you can tear us apart there, you can easily divide us in the workplace. So this idea of being inclusive and having some measure of interconnectedness, what's the buzzword they use? Intersectionality or intersectional behavior. If we can do that, if we can bring people from all different diverse backgrounds, different ideas and ideologies, all them together and say, you know what? We want better wages, hours, conditions. We want better opportunities for working people, and we're not going to be divided by the simplistic nonsense you keep shoveling at us. They know we win. And they're scared to death of that, which is why they spend so much time, energy, and effort trying to divide and scare us. Thrilled to hear that working people are coming together, no matter where it is. Good on you folks out there on the West Coast. Gonna take a quick break. You miss any portion of the program? Make sure you grab the podcast. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Back after this.
The Environmental Protection Agency will call for restrictions on all future and existing power plants that run on coal or natural gas.
Biden EPA to launch new landmark effort to limit carbon pollution.
Climate change isn't a future problem, it is a current problem.
Earth hits grim new records for global ice loss and rising seas. Plus,
environmental justice will become the responsibility of every single federal agency. I mean, every single federal agency.
President Biden boosts environmental justice.
All of those boosts and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Will we step up to our ambitions? Will we stand together to meet the great challenges we have? Will we preserve our planet for future generations?
No, I don't think so. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, big news from the EPA this week.
Oh, yes, indeed. As we go to air, the Environmental Protection Agency is on the verge of proposing new rules requiring the nation's power plants to cut their carbon emissions.
How quickly can the Republicans write a lawsuit against that?
Oh, instantly.
Yeah.
It matters because electricity from coal and natural gas-fired power plants is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. after transportation. If adopted, the new draft pollution standards would require utility companies to capture nearly all carbon emissions from their smokestacks by 2040, leaving the companies to determine how, either by switching to clean renewable sources like wind and solar, or by using costly new technology to capture emissions from their smokestacks.
Or by filing a lawsuit.
No commercial power plants in the United States use carbon capture technology right now, and the new rules are expected to trigger an immediate challenge from Republican-controlled states in the Supreme Court, which blocked a previous Obama-era effort.
Of course.
Meanwhile, the Earth broke grim new records for melting glaciers, rising sea levels, and ocean warming in 2022, caused primarily by the burning of fossil fuels. The World Meteorological Organization's annual State of the Global Climate Report, released on Earth Day, confirms that the past 8 years were the hottest 8 years in the instrumental record. Last year, the oceans hit a new all-time record high for heat content. Antarctic sea ice fell to its lowest extent on record. 60% of the ocean surface saw at least one marine heat wave. Average global sea levels also reached record highs, and the rate of sea level rise itself has doubled since 1993. Additional evidence that man-made climate change is accelerating. The report also found, quote, off-the-charts melting of the world's glaciers, and that matters for millions of people around the world who rely on glacier meltwater for drinking water and food production.
Off the charts melting.
Yep. Here in the U.S., about 1 in 3 people in the United States breathe polluted air that harms their health and shortens their lives. And it's primarily from gas-powered vehicles and industrial plants. That's according to the American Lung Association's annual State of the Air report, which found that increasing wildfires, drought, and inequality have stalled improving air quality efforts, with low-income and communities of color disproportionately affected.
It also found that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's hometown of Bakersfield is the most polluted city in the entire United States.
Yep, and McCarthy has proposed repealing clean energy provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act climate law. But the vast majority of Americans support federal government action to address climate change. According to new Pew Research data, 70% of Americans want the government to prioritize renewable energy sources like wind and solar over expanding production of fossil fuels. But there's a deep partisan divide. 80% of Democrats consider climate change a major threat. Only 23% of Republicans do.
Lucky they got gerrymandering.
President Biden criticized McCarthy and Republicans when he signed an executive order creating the Office of Environmental Justice in the White House to ensure that poverty, race, and ethnic status do not lead to worse exposure to pollution and environmental harm.
Nice.
Environmental justice will be the mission of the entire government, woven directly into how we work with state, local, tribal, and territorial governments. This is an order that directs the federal agencies to address gaps in science and technology.
Nice. About time.
And finally, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday rejected an attempt by Big Oil to delay climate liability lawsuits brought by U.S. cities and states trying to hold oil companies accountable for costly damages caused by man-made climate change. Big Oil was trying to move the cases to friendlier federal courts, but the Supreme Court declined to bail them out on that.
Nice. Are you okay, Supreme Court? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Twitters, and Mastodons at Green News Report.
tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So on Wednesday, there's a child labor briefing, and I can't believe it. And you've heard me say this before. I cannot believe that we're in this moment talking about kids going back to work. It just blows my mind. But there is a member-level child labor briefing by the Department of Labor's principal deputy administrator to that committee. And you go, how is it that this has even gone this far? The fact that states across this country are well organized in pushing a repeal of a lot of the labor laws that we put in place to protect children, to ensure that they go to school, that they get an education, that they have an opportunity to be kids. I mean, it's nuts to me, but this is where we are. And Iowa has been out in front leading the horrible charge. And that's why I've asked Iowa State Senator and Democratic leader Zach Walz to come talk with us. I saw Zach give a speech on one of the social media platforms, and I said, I got to get this guy to come share some thoughts. Zach, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, really happy to be here.
So let's start with right from the beginning. I mean, I cannot believe that we're in this moment. I can't wrap my head around the idea that people sitting in the same chamber that you're in are okay with 14-year-olds going into meatpacking plants, doing dangers. I'm struggling with that. Help me if you can.
Well, you and me both, Rick. You know, that was one of, I would say, the most heartless debates that I've ever been a part of in the Iowa Senate, and we've had some really bad ones. And, you know, the reality, of course, is that Iowa is facing a workers' crisis. But rather than raising wages, rather than trying to make our state more attractive to new workers, what Senate Republicans and Governor Kim Reynolds are doing is trying to allow Iowa kids, you know, young teenagers, to work more dangerous jobs. I would say that they have this attempt to roll back protections that have been in place for decades. And frankly, it's a pretty radical redefinition of what it means to be a young person. You know, Rick, if you're anything like me, I worked jobs when I was a teenager.
Sure.
They were incredibly rewarding and enriching experiences. We don't have a problem with teenagers working in age-appropriate, safe conditions. What we have a problem with is this idea that you're going to allow 16 or 17-year-olds to serve alcohol, that you're going to allow them to work in hazardous or dangerous occupations like roofing or excavation or demolition, where, I mean, and you're not just endangering the kids themselves, but the adults working around them. There's a reason why we have these fair labor and child labor laws to protect against that kind of exploitation, and Republicans are trying to roll that back. It's shocking.
No, and you used the word that I was going to use. I mean, I'm not against kids learning good work ethic. I want my kids to have good work ethic. They've always had jobs that they've done, but they've not been the exploitative kind of jobs. They've not been the dangerous jobs. They're not the ones that are competing with their parents to put food on the table. These are learning jobs, not career jobs. And that to me is a struggle. Because, you know, I want kids to have good work ethic. I had a paper route at 8 years old, taught me enormous lessons. This isn't what we're talking about.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I mean, the proposal that Republicans have put forward, I mean, fundamentally, it takes Iowa in the wrong direction. Just like you said, you know, we want Iowa kids to have enriching work experiences that prepare them for lifelong careers, right? But the changes that Senate Republicans made in their legislation, it just opens the door for exploitation and for dangerous work that could get Iowa kids injured or even killed. You know, there was and we were talking about this during the break, there was this investigation by the U.S. Department of Labor recently. They wound up making a 7-figure penalty to a food sanitation company that was hiring, you know, over 100 children in states across the Midwest, kids as young as 13 years old doing sanitation work in meatpacking plants. I mean, this is really radical stuff that Republicans are putting forward. And the thing that I'll say, you know, this bill doesn't say that what happened in that situation is okay, but it's all about the kind of culture that you're creating, right? Republicans want a culture where those kinds of things are going to be more common and not less. I think that any reasonable, any common sense person would look at an investigation like what the U.S. Department of Labor did and said, what we should be doing is strengthening protections against child labor. In Iowa, Republicans did exactly the opposite.
Now, what was interesting to me, and obviously you know the law much better than I do, that went through. One of the things that caught my attention was the immunity shield that Republicans seem to love for corporations. Can you explain a little bit better than I can this idea that if I'm getting this right, if there's a program between a school and an employer and the kid gets hurt, the employer's not responsible. They're immune. Is the school responsible? Are the parents responsible? Is the kid just out of luck? How do they justify that? How do they justify that?
Well, I mean, Rick, frankly, there is no justification. I mean, for many years, Iowa was a state that prided itself on having a moderate government, either center left or center right. Instead, what we've seen in the last several years since Republicans took the trifecta is this increasingly radical march towards kind of the ultra right wing. And it's really hard to watch, obviously, because Iowa for decades was, like I said, a very moderate state. We voted for some Republicans, we voted for some Democrats, but we were pretty close to the middle. And what's happened, I mean, this has mostly really happened since Donald Trump's rise in 2016, is you've seen this march further and further and further to the right. And so, this child labor bill, I mean, again, they're justifying the whole thing is trying to say that they're going to solve this worker shortage that we have here. But we know that policing children in unsafe working conditions, that's not a solution.
Yeah, I mean, just the premise from the start. We're going to solve our worker shortage by exploiting children. That's a sentence that should not be spoken.
100%. On the literal backs of children. I mean, think about how twisted that is. And again, this isn't about, from my perspective, this isn't about saying teenagers are already able, under current Iowa law, to work in safe, appropriate professions. And by the way, we're not just talking about, working at a grocery store. I mean, you can give teenagers really serious responsibility. I was a lifeguard when I was a teenager. I mean, you're talking about situations where if something goes wrong, you're literally expected to go pull somebody who's drowning out of water, right? We're not saying that kids can't or teenagers can't be trusted with responsibility. What we're saying is that the law should protect them against being exploited in unsafe work environments that jeopardize their health or development and their ability to earn an income. Right. So we introduced amendments that would have said basically because think about it, right? If you're a teenager and you get hurt on the job and your workers' compensation is tied to your earnings and you're a teenager, I mean, you're in big trouble, right? And so we said, look, there are other professions where we have decided if you're a volunteer firefighter, right, you're not getting paid anything, but it's a dangerous profession. If you get hurt as a volunteer firefighter, you should be able to get fair compensation, workers' compensation, even though you don't have adequate earnings. And Republicans said no.
Wow.
Right. And actually, and Rick, I don't know if this even got on your radar, but during this debate, Senate Republicans actually decided to stop answering questions at all on the floor. Historically, the back and forth of debate, asking Republican senators questions about what's in the bill, trying to establish legislative intent. I mean, that has been historically, any deliberative body. That's
how it's supposed to work. Yeah, exactly. So the question that I have out of this then, because I wanted to get to this, is this emanating from legislators in Iowa, or is this part of a much bigger scheme? Because we're seeing these bills popping up in other states. I mean, I look at the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, who has all this model legislation. Is there a body out there saying child labor is our thing and we're moving this in states across the country? Are you seeing that? Because, look, if you can't answer a question about your bill, it tells me you didn't write it.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And we have seen a Florida-based operation that's called the Opportunity Solutions Project. They've been working in Iowa for several years now. Before this year, most of their work had been targeting our social safety net, going after things like food stamps, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and other forms of public assistance that so many Iowa families depend on because corporations are paying such low wages and so many families are still struggling to get by. And that was true, before this year. And now this new outfit, this Opportunity Solutions Project, which, I mean, it sounds like something that like an artificial intelligence chatbot came up with. It's just gobbledygook. It doesn't mean anything. They basically are now pushing this bill forward on the child labor piece. My understanding is not just in Iowa, but across the country. And so I don't know if this is associated with Ron DeSantis somehow, Florida, or whatever. But there's certainly, I think, you're seeing this very hands-on approach, part of the systematic rollback happening at the state level. And my guess, Rick, is that you're going to start to see this new Supreme Court stacked with these, Republican justices. Essentially, is they can, just like they did, on the abortion issue, push that power from the federal level back down to the state level. What might be happening here is that this Opportunity Solutions Project is kind of getting out in front of that. Maybe there's a challenge coming into the federal level to some of the fair labor or child labor protections that are out there. And so they're trying to kind of preempt it almost at the state level.
No, all these groups with these euphemistic names, like the Institute for the Love of Puppies, they have nothing but nefarious and means at the end of it. And this is one of those. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Iowa State Senator Zach Walz. He is also the Democratic leader there. Let me ask you this, because you brought up food stamps a moment ago. It seems like all of this stuff is attacking working people, and there seems to be that playbook. Is it all this Opportunity Solution people, or are there other actors involved in this? Because it looks to me, and again, as you said a moment ago, Iowa had always been a fairly moderate state, fairly middle of the road. I mean, one of my favorite people, Tom Harkins, was a senator there for years. It seems like there's a radical agenda. Food stamps, the bill that you guys had was insane. Now there's this legislation going through to strip the Auditor General of its powers. There's a lot going on here to not just tear apart our social safety net, but also tear apart the very checks and balances, the very democratic processes that we've come to expect out of our country.
Yeah, Rick, that's absolutely right. So, I mean, tomorrow we actually just got the debate calendar. Senate Republicans will be debating and almost certainly passing a bill that will strip our Auditor of State, who not coincidentally is the only statewide elected Democrat left in Iowa. Auditor Rob Sand will essentially strip him of his ability to actually conduct investigations and actually audit and be an effective watchdog for taxpayers. What Republicans are doing is taking our watchdog, putting them in the kennel, and throwing away the key, right? You can't be an effective watchdog if you don't have the ability to subpoena people and investigate people and get answers to tough questions. That's the whole point. And again, that goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago with Republicans refusing to answer questions on the Senate floor, refusing to give the public the answers that they deserve about the legislation that the highest deliberative body, the Iowa Senate, is considering. It also goes to something that is, I mean, so hard to talk about. You almost can't believe that it's true. But this year, for the first time that anyone here can remember, when Senate Republicans introduced their state budgets, right? We all know what a budget is. It's the numbers that you use to plan how you're going to spend your money. Republicans introduced budgets that didn't have numbers. We called these blank check budgets. It's funny to me because Republicans will say, oh, Democrats don't know what a woman is because they support rights for transgender people. Apparently, Iowa Republicans don't know what a budget is because they said that these were budgets and they didn't even have numbers in them. I mean, give me a break. And so now we're debating these budgets, and the actual numbers are getting filled in at the 11th hour. Public had no opportunity to weigh in. It's just these step after step after step towards one party rule. And no consideration of a lowercase d democratic process at all.
No, look, it's not just Iowa. I look at what Ron DeSantis did in Florida, throwing that prosecutor off. I look at a lot of the talk of legislation in places like Georgia to go after prosecutors. I mean, there's a lot of this kind of fascistic behavior going on, and it's one of those things where the Maya Angelou quote, when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Republican Party right now, and this is an anti-democratic party who hates working people. I say it all the time. Republicans hate working people. Look at what they're doing, and look what they did to your state. I mean, the food stamp thing, the child labor thing, the education bill that we didn't even talk about. There is so much bad going on. So my last question for you is this resonating with anyone? I mean, are your constituents seeing this? Are people getting it, or are they on the outrage side?
No, so Rick, I've been a state senator since 2018, and I've been the Senate Minority Leader since 2020. So we're just finishing my third session now as leader. And one of the things that we've really launched this year is a renewed effort to do two particular things. One, engaging our labor partners, making sure that we're talking to our leadership, trying to get in front of their membership to hear their questions, listen to them, dialogue with them. We've had these meetings across the state, over in Council Bluffs in Western Iowa, and just this past Saturday in Burlington, which is in Southeast Iowa, a historic manufacturing community right along the Mississippi River. And questions about public education were on everybody's mind. Your listeners have probably seen some of these bills introduced across the country, things attacking our public education system, taking $1 billion out of our public education system over the next 4 years, handing those over to private school that are this voucher program. And we're already seeing, by the way, the ink on that law is just drying, and private schools in Iowa are already saying, well, yeah, don't worry, we're going to raise tuition. So it's this huge scam. It's going to hurt working people. It's going to hurt public education and all the families who depend on it. And I do think that you're seeing in that Burlington town hall, people wanted to talk about public education more than any other topic. Not only the private school voucher program, but attempts to ban books, to go after teachers, to put them in jail. I mean, things that sound, just dystopian, like they're out of 1984 or Animal Farm, but instead that's what's happening. And I think the thing that's so important, we can't let Republicans divide us. That's what they're trying to do with all of this stuff. They're trying to pit us against each other to say, oh, this is about attacking transgender kids, or oh, this is about attacking, people of color, whatever the case may be. And we have to say no. We know that there's power in solidarity. We know that when people come together, we can fight for a common good that we share. We can't let the fear and the hatred divide us. We have to come together. That's what this is all about.
There you go. Zach, I appreciate you taking some time. As this stuff continues, I'd like to have you come back and share some more with us. Because, look, I think Iowa is like ground zero and horrible. So anything we can do to help, let me know. I appreciate your time.
I look forward to being back again.
Thanks so much, Senator Zach Walz. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It's really amazing what has happened to Iowa. And like I said, we went through there in October, and everyone we talked to, was saying, look, the state's getting more radical. It's the media culture that has just gripped the right-wing talk radio, the F channel, all of this that has pushed them in this direction of fear. Because look, people are struggling. People are struggling to make ends meet. And, you see all of this money going in there, pushing in a direction to undo public education, to undo restrictions for child labor, to tatter the social safety net even more. And that, interestingly enough, in talking with the people while we were there, that was part of who they were, the pride of community. And they're really tearing it apart. So for me, the question becomes, do people wake up and see what's happening around them? Or, is it that, you're in the boiling water? I don't know. Interesting story that was somebody sent me. I don't talk an awful lot about COVID because the whole COVID thing is, one of probably how do I want to put this? Probably the worst case of Monday morning quarterbacking ever. I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem of what we did to keep people safe. I think we probably went maybe a little too conservative. But the reality is grandma didn't die. And what I find interesting is the people who say, it was all a hoax, there's no big deal because we're still alive. That kind of makes me laugh because we did all of these things to keep people safe. Now, did we do some things wrong? Yeah, always. You're always going to do some things wrong. There's always going to be someone to Monday morning quarterback. Now, there were some things that were plain crazy. And one of them came from my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, where there was a doctor, and you may remember her. She was the one who went in front of the Ohio Senate and said that, actually it was the House. It wasn't the Senate. I want to be completely accurate. It was the House. She testified that, how did it go? That people are being magnetized by the vaccine. That if you took the dreaded shot, that you now had keys sticking to your forehead, and that there was an interface between the vaccine and the 5G towers. I'm not sure what that interface was, but I gotta assume it was something to make you crazy, or I don't even know. But you remember she was mocked pretty badly about it. Evidently, and this is the story that the headline was, Ohio doctor says coronavirus vaccines make you magnetic. The state wants to pull her license. So the right has been losing their mind, going, we're going to defend her. And I'm going, how can you possibly defend her? It's not even about the stupid stuff she said when you bother to read the article. And this is why it's so important to have all of the facts and not just a headline that someone wrote after the fact. The reality is evidently after she testified, the state medical board of Ohio went to investigate her. They regulate physicians. Now, whatever that reason was, she decided to ignore the subpoena. She decided to ignore everything and just not participate, refuse to cooperate. So they're saying, well, if you're not going to cooperate, we're going to have to pull your license until you do. Now, this is one of those funny moments where you go, so she doesn't recognize the body that oversees her profession that she has a license to, but she's fighting to hold on to the license from a body that she doesn't recognize, who she believes is unconstitutional, which is crazy. It's a lot of crazy talk. But this is sadly who a lot of people pay attention to. And this is how our politics have gotten so out of hand. This woman testified in front of a House committee at the behest of a legislator who said, please come spew your nonsense. Please come tell everybody that they're magnetic now that they've gotten. And look, I've not had a key. In fact, I lose my keys all the time. There's part of me that goes, I wish I were magnetic so I wouldn't lose my damn keys. But it'll be interesting to see if they actually do follow through and pull her license. And honestly, if I'm in the greater Cleveland area, I'm probably not going to see her as a doctor. Just kind of throwing that out there. Seems a little quacky to me. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Would you go to a doctor who said that if you got the vaccine, you'd be magnetic, or there was an interface between the whatever was in it and the 5G towers that aren't there yet? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1978. That was the day of an important victory for any woman in the United States with a pension. The Supreme Court handed down its decision in a case known as Los Angeles Water Department versus Manhart. Manhart and a group of current and past female employees at the department had sued. The women were required to pay more into their pension than were the men. The reason for this policy was that women lived longer on average. That meant that the 2,000 women employed at the water department had to contribute nearly 15% more than their 10,000 male coworkers. The women argued that this violated Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which prohibited discrimination based on gender. The case wound its way through the court system. The ACLU filed a brief in support of the women's cause at the U.S. Supreme Court. The women won their case in a 6-2 decision. The majority of justices decided that even if women lived longer than men as a group, it would be impossible to know how long each individual woman might live. Therefore, individual women could not be held to a different standard for their pensions. The case was an important affirmation of the protections of the Civil Rights Act. Yet despite this victory, the women were not returned any of the extra money they had been required to pay into their pensions. Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens, writing for the majority, found that such retroactive payments could be, quote, devastating for a pension fund. He wrote that, quote, administrators of retirement plans must be given time to adjust gradually to Title VII's demands. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Given the rabid right-wingism of most Republican office holders in my state of Texas, you might assume that the climate here is only fit for rattlesnakes, scorpions, and venomous critters of pious political extremism. Yet, the true Texas political character, historically and currently, is vehemently anti-corporate and deeply rooted in the uniting ethic of the common good. For an historic example, look to the state's first constitution. It outlawed banks and required a 2/3 vote of the legislature to form a corporation. And today, grassroots Texans in the rural town of Llano have just demonstrated the power of progressive community values that are common in this supposedly conservative state. The issue was book banning. A batch of political extremists had decided to purge the public library of 17 books. Porno, they shrieked, yet none are pornographic. They're simply about ideas and realities that Republican culture war zealots don't like. Namely, books documenting the history of institutional racism in America and the normality of America's LGBTQ community. Common sense Llano locals rebelled, suing the county government for autocratically trying to control the people's freedom to read and learn. And a federal judge has now ruled that the book banning was flagrantly unconstitutional, ordering the targeted titles back on the shelves. Then, in a collective spasm of knee-jerk ignorance and arrogance, the county's book-banning officials announced that, by gollies, they would just defund and shut down the entire library system. Yeah, that'll teach people to respect authority. Again, though, locals rebelled, turning out in force to protest the officials' political chicanery, forcing them to reverse their closure scheme. This is Jim Hightower saying, as one 10-year-old student in Llano succinctly testified, it's not the county's job to burn the library down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of fun and entertainment on the Twitters today. The Blue Check Mafia out in full force defending their boy Schmucker Carlson. A couple of my favorites, Marjorie Trainwreck Green. Cable news is about to be taught a powerful lesson after Fox News caved to the woke mob and fired Tucker Carlson. Americans no longer blindly watch the news like they did decades ago. They only watch the ones who have the courage to tell the truth. Americans are about to quit watching. And my thought is the truth. which truth are we talking about? Are we talking about the truth that he came on air and said, this is the truth? Or the truth that he was emailing about how the people watching this are all dupes and how he believed none of it? I'm just curious, which alternative truth do we believe? And here to share some thoughts on the whole shenanigans, I've asked Madeline Peltz to come talk with us. She's the Media Matters Deputy Director of Rapid Response. Madeline, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So this is where my mind's at. Which truth are we talking about?
I think that we will see the various truths unfold over the next few days. Obviously, the news of Tucker Carlson's ouster has been shrouded in mystery, a lot of speculation about how exactly we ended up here, and certainly it was a sudden outcome. I don't think anyone saw it coming. It's difficult to overstate exactly how much of an impact this will have on not only cable news, but cable in general. And it remains to be seen exactly what led to this outcome. But I think that there's a lot of people who want to clear up their role in this, and certainly I think there will be a lot of chatter among the mainstream press in the coming days.
There's part of me that goes, it happened so quickly, and I gotta think this has got to be one of those elevator things, because if Fox News was really going to get rid of him, they would have transitioned, they would have done some triangulations, whatever. This seems to me like this was a personal thing. Somebody said something on the elevator. He was called into a meeting. Rupert didn't like it, and it was that kind of knee-jerk. That's where my mind thought is. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that I didn't see it ending like this. I think the fact that they were running a promo for his show later that night, about 10 minutes before the news broke that he had been terminated, is somewhat of a smoking gun, that this was extremely sudden. If it's not a smoking gun, then it is truly a comedy of errors. But I think based on what I've been reading, there has been a lot of surprise within the building at Fox News about this outcome. There was a report today that Tucker Carlson found out 10 minutes before he was terminated that there was a press release going out. I don't know whether or not that's going to hold up to be the case, but it's pretty extraordinary. I think that it likely has something to do with the lawsuit he's facing in New York of creating a hostile work environment brought by a former producer. And that stems from Fox's that stems from her testimony in the Dominion case. And so all of these things are deeply intertwined with each other. And I think it is, it's certainly a big media drama and the talk of the town today.
Yeah,
and yesterday.
Look, I'm happy to see some sanity going on over there, but because it seems to me that maybe the check went out and they go $787 million. That's a lot of money. And oh, by the way, as you pointed out, he's got a suit. They've got a suit. There's another suit. It seems like the pockets may be only so deep. So, maybe that was part of the purge. Anybody else on the chopping block? I know there was talk of Maria Bartiromo and the judge Janine. Are they next? Are they on the chopping block?
I haven't heard. I will be the first to tell you, but I don't know. I think it's really stunning that Maria Bartiromo is still at the network. I'm not exactly sure what she brings, besides being a completely unhinged liability. And it's really the trajectory of her career is so unusual. She started as a trailblazer for women in financial television and is now widely regarded as a crackpot. And I don't know exactly what audience she's bringing to Fox or why they're protecting her, but she's still there. Not only is Judge Janine still there, but there's been reporting in the industry press that she is featured prominently in their pitch to advertisers as they approach the major ad buying season in their in the way that the ads are bought and sold cyclically on cable news, and she is a big part of the pitch that they're putting forward. And that, again, it shows that Fox has not learned its lesson and has no intention to moderate.
Yeah, because I'm waiting to see who's next. Because someone asked me, do you think they're going to try and come back to the center? I go, no. They're going further than Tucker. Tucker will be moderate. We will look back we will pine for the days of the moderate Tucker Carlson by the time Fox is done with this, because they understand what sells. And the line that I keep coming back to, Uncle Rupert gave it to us. It's not red or blue, it's green, and they understand what brings in the green, and crazy brings in the green.
Yeah, Tucker's not. He was the biggest voice in cable news. He had the biggest ratings, or among the biggest ratings on the best rated network. But with that being said, in the absence of Trump, his influence was not what it was in 2018, 19, 2020 that it is in 2023. And at a certain point, all of these things that have piled up in the last few months and weeks, the Kevin McCarthy giving him the January 6 tapes, the Ray Epps thing that was on 60 Minutes, that all of the revelations from the Dominion suit, at a certain point, it's just not worth the headache.
Yeah. Any chance it was the Epps thing? I mean, there are a lot of people saying, well, they brought this up, this could be more. Any chance that was it? It seems mild to me, given the stuff that they've done over the years, but any chance that has a part of it?
Well, I don't know. I don't think that could really be the main reason. But with that being said, it's not hard for me to imagine Rupert Murdoch watching 60 Minutes and being totally over it, essentially saying, how I'm not going through this again should another defamation suit come down. And the Ray Epps coverage was terrible, just like the Seth Rich coverage was terrible. It's just going into this critical ad buying season, as well as high profile contract renegotiations with cable carriers. Fox is circling the wagons, and it seems like Tucker Carlson may not have been willing to play ball behind the scenes.
Yeah, as we're a Hannity, I think Hannity perfectly will do whatever you want. Hannity's your boy. He will follow the commands, which is why I think he's perfectly safe.
Yeah, I think that he has learned some of the lessons that came with the outrage cycles from his show during the Trump administration, and he is simply not as influential among the Republican Party as Tucker Carlson has come to be in recent years. And so, yeah, I mean, Sean Hannity knows what the line is, and Tucker Carlson knows what the line is too. He just doesn't care.
Yeah. Well, again, it comes back to that, like Rupert said, it's not about red or blue. It's about green, and they get that. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Madeline Peltz. She's the Deputy Director of Rapid Response at Media Matters, MediaMatters.org, the website, if you want to take a look at the work that they do there and follow along. So what is this going to mean for Fox? What does this mean for the cable news world? I mean, you saw Don Lemon fired. Now you got Tucker fired. And it seems like the cycle's moving crazier to the extreme. Do you see Tucker landing at OAN or one of the other more radical right-wing outlets, or does he start his own little shindig?
I don't see him landing at another cable network like OAN or Newsmax. First of all, I don't think that they can afford them. One American News simply doesn't have the distribution for Tucker to be interested. And so I don't see him landing at another cable network. It's also very possible that he's under a non-compete that could last for years before he's able to transition into the next phase of his career. And in terms of digital right-wing media, the space is very overcrowded. You've got Steven Crowder, you've got the Daily Wire, you've got the Blaze, you've got the Daily Caller. These are all outlets that are not only competing with each other, but cannibalizing each other's audiences. And it's really not fruitful ground for a personality like Tucker Carlson. He will end up somewhere. It's very possible that this right-wing video hosting rival to YouTube. It's called Rumble, and is backed by Peter Thiel. That they are scaling up a robust exclusive creators program. It's possible he could end up there, depending on what the non-compete says, but he will never be the same Tucker Carlson that he was on Friday ever again. It is impossible for him to garner the same audience that Fox News has. The 8 p.m. hour of Fox News is a legacy hour. Tucker Carlson got lucky. He inherited Bill O'Reilly's audience, and it was a built-in floor of ratings that he took O'Reilly's model and simply supercharged it. And now, without none of that would have been possible without Fox as an institution. And so it'll never ever be the same for him again.
No, it's going to be interesting to see where he lands and how this goes. But if you listen to the Musk marks on Twitter, the folks with the blue check mafia who are just all in. In fact, the reason that Tucker was fired was simply because he had the audacity to tell the truth and refused to let Fox News control him. Which you go, I think we're touching in that alternative reality a little too much, and what it is we're drinking or smoking is not helping.
Well, that exact crowd of right-wing influencers on Twitter, they are big losers in this too, because no one was giving a platform as big of a platform to the likes of libs of TikTok or Glenn Greenwald as Tucker Carlson tonight was. And there will be no platform that will come in and sweep up that same cast of characters and provide them with a microphone like Tucker. And so they are mad, and because they've suffered a loss in this as well.
Yeah, I feel their pain. Let's go with that. I'm feeling their pain. So where do we see this going? Again, I mean, you're the one, you follow this stuff. I've never, just between you and me, I've never actually watched Tucker's show. I've seen clips, but I've never actually watched it on TV. In fact, I want nothing to do with Fox News. What fills that gap? I mean, are we seeing someone coming up? I mean, Jesse Waters, took over for O'Reilly and kind of filled that space. Is there an up and coming person that we were seeing maybe fill in this spot? What are you thinking?
It's hard to say. Fox, frankly, has a shallow bench. A lot of people are floating Jesse Waters. I think Jesse Waters would not be as successful in the 8 p.m. hour, either as Tucker Carlson or as he is now in the 7 p.m. hour. And so that wouldn't be my first choice if I was leading Fox News. There's a number of other peripheral figures at the network, like Pete Hegseth, Judge Jeanine, as you mentioned, and others who potentially could take over the 8 p.m. hour. But again, impossible to fill the shoes of Tucker Carlson in terms of his influence in the Republican Party and internally at Fox News. And I think that my personal opinion, and not everyone agrees with me, but I think that it's possible that there is, from this digital right-wing media ecosystem, a figure like a Candace Owens who could come in and take over and leverage their viral social media audience to create some new energy at the 8 p.m. hour for Fox News. But that is a really high bar to clear for someone who doesn't come from a TV background, and they are in really a difficult place where their 8 p.m. hour is vacant ahead of the ad buying season and these cable contract negotiations.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because, look, Fox has been the center of that right-wing echo chamber for so long. And, I know a lot of my left friends are like, oh, my God, this is the end of them. Another lawsuit, all this could be I'm going, no, they'll be fine. They're going to find their way. And I think they're going to be crazier on the other side. But it is entertaining to watch this moment. Do you see anything, last question I've got for you, do you see anything positive coming out of this? I know I've had a bunch of people say, well, this is good for democracy. Media is going to, moderate because of these lawsuits. Do you see anything good out of this?
Well, I don't think that lawsuits are the way to resolve a problem like Fox News. I think that the case with Dominion was just an extraordinary body of evidence that that was able to take a defamation case farther than anyone anticipated, just based on the sheer volume of evidence. So I don't hope that we are litigating the press in the courts. With that being said, Tucker Carlson losing his slot is an enormously important achievement for protecting democracy. I think about what is going on in Missouri right now with transgender people losing access to gender affirming care and the panic that is spreading throughout that community in that state. And it's people like Tucker Carlson who have been driving that hate campaign and fear campaign. And without that microphone in his hand in the same way, it will alleviate some pressure on anti-trans hysteria that has taken hold in the Republican Party. That said, it's not going away. It's still a big fight that we need to fight for, but there is no one who has participated in this hate campaign with as big of a microphone as Tucker Carlson. And so I am hopeful that this will slow down the momentum of legislation in the states that is attacking LGBTQ folks and communities.
It's going to be interesting to see where this plays out. But Madeline, I appreciate you sharing a little time with us. Thanks for your insight. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Thanks so much.
Good stuff, Madeline Peltz. Make sure you check out the work she does over at Media Matters, where she is the Deputy Director of Rapid Response, MediaMatters.org, the website, if you want to take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. 1969. The governor of South Carolina sent 1,000 state troopers and National Guardsmen to Charleston, South Carolina. They were sent there to deal with the striking hospital workers who wanted union recognition. The strike had started on March 19th at the Medical College Hospital. A little over a week later, more than 60 black workers from the Charleston County Hospital joined the strike in solidarity. The governor was determined to use every tactic at his disposal to break the strike. He worried that if the strikers were successful, unionization efforts would spread throughout the other sectors of state employees. During the strike, a hotel room of one of the union organizers was bombed by an unknown assailant. Soldiers with bayonets marched through the streets of Charleston. Hundreds of picketers were arrested, including teenagers who had joined the protest. The governor had gone as far as imposing a 9 p.m. curfew on people to keep them off the streets. But the workers were determined to win their rights. The United Auto Workers sent $10,000 to support the striking workers. Civil rights leaders from across the nation came to South Carolina to support the workers. Andrew Young and Ralph Abernathy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were among those who were arrested. Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. King, gave a speech saying, "Hospital workers have been working full-time jobs at part-time pay. After all, $1.30 an hour is not a wage, it is an insult. I also have another interest in being here," she said, and that is many of the hospital workers throughout our nation are women, black women. Many of them are the main supporters of their families. The hospital workers were able to win a grievance process and modest pay increase. Although they did not win union recognition, they inspired hospital workers across the country. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. So our quote of the day comes from the Donald over on the Truth Socials. I still can't get that Truth Social thing out of my head. But Trump socialed out the fact that Tucker Carlson will no longer be on Fox News is a big blow to cable news and to America. Tucker was insightful, interesting, and ratings gold. And, I'm looking at this and I'm going, suck up much? Because the only person who could really, I think, tear Trump apart would be Tucker. I mean, and my mind goes back to that Monday interview that he did where, Tucker Carlson, after we know all the things that he said about Trump in emails and all of the things that he believed about the election nonsense that was being thrown out, that he sat there fairly neutered and didn't press Trump at all and, bobbed his head like he was supposed to, let Donald finish, that kind of stuff. There used to be an old profession that used to do that too, but now that Tucker's gone, Trump's got to kind of, I think, worry a little bit, because if Tucker comes out and goes, I'm going to go after him, it could be interesting. I do find it funny that Trump wants to get the old gang back together. Evidently, there's been some rumblings about bringing Kellyanne Conway back. That ought to be fun. I'm not sure if she's going to come back, but it'll be interesting. Now on the Tucker thing, I got a couple of emails from folks saying that I was probably right in that it was a personal thing between Tucker and Rupert Murdoch. And look, I think this is one of those things that was just a bridge too far. And one of the theories now being floated, one of the theories is, and I didn't know this until I just got the email, is that I guess last Friday Tucker had given a speech to the Heritage Foundation because, hey, they keep spreading the money around. It was their 50th anniversary gala. And in that 50th anniversary, think about the damage the Heritage Foundation has done in 50 years. I mean, because understand, the Heritage Foundation came out of the whole Powell memo from 1971. So just 2 years later, they built this and fund the Heritage Foundation. And look, out of that sprung all of these think tanks, all of the State Policy Network, all of these euphemistically named groups like, for the love of apple pie and mom, or, whatever, who are doing just the worst things to our country, but with such happy sounding names. But evidently Tucker gave a speech where I guess the religion thing supposedly went a little too far for Rupert Murdoch, in framing it in those religious terms of it was just a battle between good and evil. And, if we let that DEI and those trans people exist, they're going to destroy the country. So we need to pray. And what's being reported is that's it's a bit too far. And I guess he did it again. And the next day, which, caught Rupert's attention. And I guess from what the source is now saying, that kind of stuff freaks Rupert out. He doesn't like all the spiritual talk. And for me, that makes perfect sense. You just go, I had enough. Yeah, it's interesting. And maybe not surprising. There's, I've said before, part of what freaks me out is you get these people who talk about freedom, but don't understand what it means, and then use it in the context of religion. And only, of course, only their religion, not yours or anyone else's or freedom from. It's just theirs, their narrow-minded belief. And this is not what I grew up believing this country was about. You have the right to pursue your path, unencumbered by others, as long as you're not infringing on their rights. And this is the world that I believe in. And because I've had a bunch of people go, well, why do you care about all these other fringe issues? You're an economics guy. You're a guy who fights for people to join unions and get better wages. All of that plays together. Because if we don't have the freedom to be who we are and go where we want to go and do what we want to do, because somebody, well, like Schmucker, has a problem with that, do you really have freedom? I know you love it. It looks good on a T-shirt. But in practice, it's a little more difficult. Anyway, I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Crazy emails go to the top. I actually prefer those. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.